I change your bum life. You fight me, it's a celebration.
I would beat you.
When you sign to fight me, it's a celebration. You ring back home, you ring your wife. Baby, we done it. We're rich, baby. Conor McGregor made us rich. Break out the red panties.
Are you ready?
That goes in the files.
Are you ready? Let's get it all!
Yo, 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 welcome back to the fifth round. As always, your boy, Stephen Moustaris. And then, of course, Gracie over there, over the shoulder, always being here as the co-host. But, man, let me dive right into it. UFC 283 was pretty solid the other night. I think it definitely delivered probably a little more than I expected, especially from the beginning of the night. The start, if you guys are in there for the early prelims, I mean, good God, you got some great performances there. And, you know, for me, I'm a broken record when I say this all the time. Like, for the Apex Arena or, like, those cards, like the Fight Night cards and, like, early prelims and even normal prelims, the beginning of them, you know, it's not the highest name people. Unless, I mean, if you're a diehard fan and you follow it crazy, you're going to know these guys. But, like, for the household names, not necessarily, you know, the biggest names. That's why they're on the early card. But I always love these guys because, you know, they're the ones only making 10 grand for the performance, you know, or just show and then making another 10 if they win. But, you know, they really got to put a name out for themselves. So, you know, you're always seeing some phenomenal shit. So, I mean, of course, you've seen the Bonfim brothers, Ismail and Gabriel, both had some nasty finishes. Ismail had one of the nastiest double flying knee knockouts you'll see of Terrence McKinney. And if you guys follow that, I mean, Terrence McKinney was just, you know, he's a big talker. He's talking shit to everybody. He's an up-and-comer. You know, I think he's probably, the fame's getting to him a little bit. I don't want to say it's blown out of proportion, but I'm just saying, you know, it seemed like he was tweeting on the way to the octagon, and for him to get slept like that after talking all that shit about Patty. You know, we're all talking about Patty, but luckily for us behind the computer and stuff, luckily, you know, we're not, for the most part, knock on wood, gonna step into the octagon and get knocked out like that, but still, you know, it's the fight game, like shit's gonna happen. But, you know, the thing I want to talk about most, you know, besides, you know, I know a lot of people right now are pretty upset with the Brazilian crowd and just how disrespectful they were to the fighters. But I mean, I know it was a little more out of hand than usual, but I mean, for all of us that have been watching it for a while, I mean, we've been seeing this forever. When the Nogueira brothers were fighting, when Shogun was fighting back in the day, Lyoto, all these guys that were just, like I said, the Nogueira brothers, you know, Fabricio were doing back in the day. Like, you see a certain amount of fighters like Jose Aldo, all these guys, like, I mean, they're chanting "you're gonna die" or whatever the hell they chant, and, you know, they're always throwing stuff at the fighters. I feel like it kind of makes it a little more fun. But I think the story to me that I think is most important out of this one, you know, I really think Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo might be, I don't want to say the greatest rivalry. All right, this is where it gets tough here. It's like, how do we describe the rivalry? Or like how are you going to put it into your, you know, ranking? It depends on, like, are we just talking about the bad blood? Are we talking about what the fights are? Because that's where it gets tough. You know, how many fights they had? Because, like, you know, we can sit here and talk about all these rivalries that there was bad blood, but, like, you know, we look into it and there's a lot of these fights that, like, to me, it can't be a rivalry if the fights aren't that close. So, I mean, like, I know Ronda and Miesha Tate are up there, but Ronda beat her ass 3 times, you know, or twice, whatever it was. I think they fought twice, but Tito versus Ken Shamrock's one of them. Tito, you know, won all 3. Was it Frankie Edgar versus BJ Penn's up there if you want to count trilogies? Frankie beat him 3-0. It's not, you know, I'm not counting it. Even like one like the Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos, like, yeah, JDS had that nasty knockout in that first fight, but then the next 2 fights weren't even close, and Cain Velasquez just was way better than him, and it showed. You know, like the John Jones versus DC bad blood, I get that point, but like John Jones beat DC twice, like I don't want to hear it, and you guys can count the steroids, whatever you want to call it. Like, John Jones still beat his ass. It wasn't close to me. You know, you got, like, and then there's the tough ones in there. Like, you got the Conor versus the Nate Diaz one, which I think is up there. Like, I really do. Like, because especially, yeah, Nate Diaz came in and shocked the world the first one. And then the second one was razor close, and like, so that one's up there for me. You know what I'm saying? That's one it's so close, and it's almost a shame that we just never got the third fight for that one. So like, that one's up there. The TJ versus Cody's another one. Like, TJ Dillashaw and Cody had the worst bad blood ever, but TJ won both fights. I remember Rampage versus Rashad Evans was really ugly there for a little bit, but Rashad won the one fight that they had. Like, there wasn't a second one ever. You know, there's these tough ones, and then you got the ones that, like, I kind of like I named. Like, I think the Conor versus Nate Diaz one's definitely up there just because of the bad blood and because of the fights, how they turned out. But, like, it's another thing that's kind of tough too. I mean, there's Conor and Khabib that might be the most bad blood in the UFC like history. Besides, I mean, like Jones and DC are up there too, but like it wasn't a fight or a close fight. Like I know Conor had his little moments or whatever, but still wasn't a close fight, and we never got a second one. So it's not like Conor ever had his moment to say about it. I know he's like better on the mic and stuff, but got his ass beat. And then this is the one for me that gets tough is these rivalries that over time they fought a bunch, but like there's 7 years in between the trilogy fight or the second fight or whatever. Kind of like for me a big one. I used to love the BJ Penn Matt Hughes rivalry, but BJ got the first win, and then Matt Hughes gets the second win. They finish each other. I think BJ got the early rear naked choke in the first fight, I think 04, 03, and then in 06, Matt Hughes got him in the third round, punched him out, basically TKO. And then, they didn't fight for another 4 or 5 years when Matt Hughes was finally at the end of his career, kind of BJ Penn too. It's a sad part too. It's BJ Penn's last win in 2010. That was his last win in his career, and that was in 2010, and he knocked him out in like 21 seconds. So that one's tough because you took those years off, and Matt Hughes kind of, like we seen, Matt Hughes kind of got punch drunk and everything, kind of lost his skill. Same with like a Dustin Poirier Conor McGregor one to me. Is like, yeah, it's a great rivalry, I guess, but like other than the 2014 meeting where Conor absolutely destroyed DP, like in all fairness, in the next two fights like weren't that close. Like DP was doing the thing, and it was weird too. Like Conor had that whole second fight that they had, or I guess the first one you want to say in 2021 in January, where like Conor was on that like just being real weird, like really nice, and then like he took the loss and he kind of like was like, oh, I was training for boxing. It was weird. He like wrote it off, and then they fight again in July, and he's like completely opposite. It's like, not to be mean, but like cocaine McGregor comes back, whiskey McGregor comes back, where we're sitting there like, what the fuck is going on here, So it's like, it wasn't that big of a rivalry to me. Snaps his leg, all that shit. So, this, and here's where, if you're looking at the Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo thing, yeah, I get that this last fight maybe didn't end the way that we wanted it to, and even though I think Brandon Moreno was finally looking amazing. The first fight, so close. You could have picked either one to win. Second fight, clearly Moreno gets the choke. Third fight might have been the closest one. It's fight 1 and fight 3 are so close. It's ridiculous. Like, honestly, it's ridiculous. And then the fourth one, clearly, finally, one of them you kind of had a feeling was finally going to take off from the other one. And Brandon Moreno, like I was kind of talking about, I think fighting Kai Kara France, that refreshment of like having a new fighter and a new game plan and everything, I thought would be the one for it. Because, I mean, it's like, I couldn't imagine how hard it is to train for one person already, let alone to train for him from 2021 to 2023, as in Deiveson Figueiredo only training for Brandon Moreno. So, it'd be really tough, I think. I'd get really bored of that. It'd be hard to wake up. I know a lot of people love the fights, and they're close, luckily, but still. So no excuses. And Moreno, I know the fight ended kind of awkward or whatever, but Moreno was kicking his ass. And so, like, but here's the crazy part with it is I think there's 15 rounds within the 4 fights that were able to be judged and actually had, tallied up and everything. And here's where it gets crazy. 7 rounds are for Deiveson Figueiredo. 7 rounds are for Brandon Moreno. And there's 1 round that was a draw, and it was because of the point deduction in the first fight. And you're sitting here like, what? Like, oh my gosh. Like, you kind of forget how close this, like, and 2, Brandon Moreno, I know Deiveson Figueiredo was one talking, and Brandon Moreno is really nice. A lot of people are making fun of him for being a nerd. So, like, it didn't get the highlight. And I know they're 125. 125 usually doesn't get the love that every other weight class does. But, I mean, good God, if we're just talking straight fighting, this is one of the greatest rivalries of all time. I don't know if I can put it in number 1. Like I said, the Conor and Nate Diaz one's pretty up there. I know Silva Chael was up there, but Silva beat Chael, and I know Chael technically could have won the first fight if he didn't get that fucking tap. I get that, but still, like, it's not that close to me. So we're really looking at, like I said, the Conor Silva. I was a big fan of the GSP Matt Hughes there for a little bit. Chuck versus Randy Couture was pretty wild. And then another one that I think's really slept on too is the Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard one. I think they ended up 1-1-1 after all that. After it was all said and done, the first one they got I think it was a split decision. I could be wrong. It might have been unanimous, but split decision with that crazy comeback where Frankie Edgar in their first fight was like knocked out twice in the first 2 rounds, basically, or 3-4 times it felt like in the first 2 rounds, and then comes back and just absolutely dominates the next 3 rounds after being concussed and all that. Was impressive. Second fight was a lot similar, very, very similar, and then it ended up being a draw, and then finally third fight similar as well, and then Frankie comes back and gets that knockout in that third fight. So like that one right there was one of them wild ones, even though it still ended 1-1-1, and at the time not many people were into the 4-fight thing. And honestly today not many people are into it either, but after a third fight ends up in a draw, it's like you kind of have to. So I don't know, it's tough for me to sit here and say like definitively, and I know in today's era everybody's like, oh, it's the greatest of all time this, greatest of all time this. Like I get that, the greatest performance, all that shit. Like I'm not into that. Like just because a fight was good doesn't mean it's the greatest fight of all time, you know what I'm saying, or a rivalry. But when we're talking just strictly just based off of performance based, it's one of them ones. It's like, it's a lot like for me it's a lot like just the scenario. I want to say the Max Holloway-Volkanovski fight, but after the last one, I don't know if I ever want to see it again, as sad as it is. I'm the biggest Max fan. But there for a little bit, it was like I would have paid to see Max versus Volkanovski 100 out of 100 times. Same with like Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko. Like you get these matchups certain times. It's like nobody else in the world, is going to beat these two people, but when they get to fight each other, it's a lot like the Bird, Magic era or something like that, or like, whoever you want to pick, like Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning there for a little bit, even though Tom won more, I get it, but they still went back and forth. Like certain guys, like you're just not beating them, but then when they get together, it just ends up being like, I don't know, it's like they're made for each other to fight, and that's how I felt about the Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo. So, if you guys have a favorite rivalry. And that's like I said, man, it's tough because, like, if we're talking off of bad blood, like, clearly the John Jones DC one's up there. Rampage and Rashad is definitely up there if you guys don't forget that. Where I get a little weird with the Chael Anderson Silva one for me is, like, Chael is just so good at talking, and we call him Uncle Chael now, and everybody loves Chael Sonnen, and, Chael P. Sonnen, and we got all the memes online, and he's never lost and all that shit, but, like, I don't know, that second fight where Silva just absolutely just buzzsaw right through him. I don't know. It kind of, in the fact that we only seen it twice, I don't know, it was a little tough for me. Vitor and Randy Couture had a really good one too, but like that was another weird one. Like, they fought in 97 and then they didn't fight until like 04, and they fought twice I think in 04. It might have been 04, 05, but still, it's just these tough ones. It's really, however you want to go off it. I think, and then again, like Tim Sylvia and Andrei Arlovsky had a really good one, really good trilogy there, where I think Andrei Arlovsky got the first one, and then Tim Sylvia knocked him out in the second one, and then the third one, if the third one wasn't such a dominant performance by Tim Sylvia, that could be up there. So, I'm really fascinated to see what you guys think, because I do hold performance base. I base that a little higher than I do the bad blood. Just because you have bad blood doesn't mean it's a really good, like Miesha Tate, no offense to the Madrid girl, but I think she had like 30 seconds in out of the 3 fights or whatever with Ronda where she actually had, maybe a chance to actually do something. And other than that, she was just absolutely dominated every other time. And like I'm a broken record here. DC and John Jones, not a rivalry to me, just because John Jones beat his ass. Like if DC would have came out, like DC Stipe to me is more of a rivalry to me. But, by the end of it, it seemed like the only reason they were getting mad at all is because, as soon as one would win, the other one would make the other one wait a year. Because DC wins the first one, makes Stipe wait a year, fights Derek Lewis, all this shit. And then Stipe is like, yo, I'm not fighting until I get that rematch, man. Like, you got a lucky punch on me. And if you look at that one, too, what makes that rivalry so fun is that DC wins the first round knockout. We all know that. And then you go into the second fight. DC's kind of like coming off that Derek Lewis fight, like, oh, I'm the man, I just, whatever. I remember this cockiness that he had, or maybe just confidence, I should say. Maybe not cockiness, but I remember the confidence that he had when he was going into that Stipe fight. He was like, oh, Stipe can't touch me. I'm too good for him, too good to wrestle. I'm beating him up, stand up too. So like, what's going to happen to me? First 2.5 rounds, absolutely destroying Stipe, and then Stipe just makes that on the fly change and just gets the finish in that 4th round, which was one of the nastiest things ever with the body kick. Like this dude was easily down 3-0. You might have been able to say 2-1, but I remember being a 3-0, and then Stipe just turns it on with them body shots. It was like 13 unanswered or something like that, finishes it. And then that third fight, if you guys don't remember, I mean, Jesus, Stipe just took over. So that makes that that rivalry was a little fun just because, the first half of the 3 fights, you had DC dominating, and then the second half of the 3 fights, it's all Stipe. So, I still, even the Stipe Francis fight, I still would have loved to see because it's 1-1, but I don't know. Those ones get weird too because when you're so respectful to each other, like, what am I getting out of it? So, I can't say definitively, like I've said multiple times now, I don't think Brandon Moreno and Figgy is the greatest rivalry of all time, but boy, I don't know if you could ask for much more than that. So, as always, your boy, Stephen Moustaris, the 5th round, and I hope you guys have a good one.